Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged. That's my guy.
Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast, coming to you live on a Tuesday evening. Excited for this one. It's an episode that we kind of pushed off because some life things happened last week, but we wanted to dive into the film from some of the offensive free agents that the Chargers have signed. So we're going to touch on, obviously, Tyler Biadasz, Charlie Kolar, Alec Ingold, and Cole Strange. So we are going to have some offensive line dialogue.
So that's Steven's thoughts on Cole Strange.
And of course, Keaton Mitchell. So we've each had some time to take a few games on tape, watch, these guys perform, and we're going to kind of outline their strengths, their weaknesses, how they fit in the offense, and things like that. So should be a fun conversation. Of course, joining me to do that, as always, is my good friend Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Doing very well. And before we begin, everybody, fist my bump.
Yeah, let's go.
I've either lost half the audience or you're all understanding and laughing.
Yes. If you have not seen that movie, please go do so immediately, and in IMAX if possible. Just truly one of the coolest movie experiences of my life. I will always remember that. And I love the book, but I think even if you did not read the book, you should still go see it. And it's just a stunning movie. So shout out Rocky, and I love that scene, man. It's super funny.
It's awesome. And I know sometimes people don't like us talking about pop culture movie stuff, but hey, I appreciate that our last video got to like 7,000 views, and we were just kind of like talking about the depth. We spent like 2 hours practically on other things too, and everyone just kind of like hung out. I love that. So today will be fun. For those who didn't follow us during the season, when we do film reviews, we're not going to have film on screen because three videos our channel will be shut down. So we're not going to have film literally on the screen to be reviewed. It's our takeaways from the film itself.
Yes, takeaways as opposed to actually watching the film. That is very, very important. We would like to make money off of our channel, and unfortunately, Big Bad NFL does not allow many channels to successfully show film on screen. So we're trying to avoid the copyright of the NFL as much as possible here on the Guilty as Charged podcast. All right, before we get started, of course, I have to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks, the best way to consume daily fantasy sports. If you're like me, your bracket is maybe kind of meh, or maybe your bracket is completely busted. Maybe you're all in on Florida. Apologies to the Gators fans there. Maybe you were, all in on Utah State. I don't really know. Maybe your situation. I'm kind of middle of the pack in my bracket group. Me and some friends from college, we always do this every single year. One year we got up to like 100 different people, and we do a $20 buy-in and things like that. So when you lose, it kind of sucks because you lose out on all the money. When you win, it's great. But Prize Picks always has you covered in each specific game. You can go as frugal as you want with 2 or 3 players. You can go as big as you want with like 10 different players. It's awesome during this time of year. Also have you covered with hockey. Baseball is right around the corner. My wife and I are going to be in Chicago this week for opening weekend. So we're going to go pull up to a Cubs game. So it'll be great to have some extra skin in the game with Prize Picks. Best way to do that is to go download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code GUILTY at checkout for a make sure I get this read right. My bad. Prize Picks. Sorry. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code GUILTY. Get it $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code GUILTY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Amaze. Yes. Love Rocky. All right, let's dive in here again. Like Tyler mentioned, we're doing more takeaways than actual showing film here. But I think we've each had some time to kind of marinate on these players a little bit more, watch more games. Like I watched 6 games of Tyler Biadasz, and so we
I did not.
Wow, it was great. I loved it. We can talk about him, and we will talk about him first. So, I think just kind of peek behind the curtain here. I think my experience watching Tyler Biadasz was very, very positive. I'll just say that. I think when it comes to us as fans and what the experience is watching some of these players, we hear things on and we from podcasts or other things, and then we see things online and how opposing fans kind of react to them. And kind of the general consensus that I got from Washington fans is that they really wish they would have held on to him, but they kind of understand if the goal is to get maybe an elite center, maybe Biadasz is not that kind of guy. And that kind of frames how you go about watching this. And in a very similar way to like when I watched Odafe Owe, all these Raven fans were like, he sucks. He's a bum. And then I watched the tape and I'm like, this guy's pretty good. So my experience with Tyler Biadasz was pretty similar to the Owe thing, where I had an expectation of what he was like as a player. And then I watched 6 games of Tyler Biadasz tape. And I'm pretty happy with this sign. I'm more than happy with this sign. I think Tyler Biadasz has a chance to be very, very valuable for the Chargers and, exceed the value that his contract financial value might show on Over the Cap.
My experience was pretty similar. This one, unlike Owe, who Ravens fans thought he sucked, like you said, Commanders fans were like, this guy's pretty good. I think you understand his limitations, but you understand what he brings to the table. He was, thorn in many weathers, like 3rd-team All-Pro center the previous year. So this is no slouch of a player. My only real thing was, okay, is he better than Bradley Bozeman? Which I knew going into it, but I just want to know how much better. And then, of course, what are you missing by not getting a Linderbaum? What? Obviously, there's a huge contract difference, but is it worth paying this guy significantly less and then to have not gotten Linderbaum in the end, which because he went to the Raiders, $27 million a year. Apparently, there's a no tag clause. That contract is chef's kiss if you're an agent or a player. The Raiders got bent over on that one.
Yeah, they did.
For Biadasz, I think that the best way I can describe it is it felt like an exhale, a real big sigh of relief watching him, knowing this is a very good player. And I don't think anyone's confusing him with one of the greats. He's not, as a great a player as Corey Linsley or the best of Pouncey and those players, but he's a very good sound player. And I only watched 3 games. I didn't watch 6, but I think that in the games that I did watch of his, I started with him against the Chiefs and then the Seahawks, and then I forget the other one. He just was a good player. And we'll get into the strengths and weaknesses and the concerns and whatnot. But this is a player that you're in absolutely no rush to move on from. I assume he's going to play very well this year. And as long as we have the realistic expectations, this is probably not one of the 3 or 5 best centers in the NFL this season. As long as you settle into realistic expectations, I think a lot of Chargers fans are going to be very, very happy with him. I thought he did a lot of things very well and few things poorly.
Yeah, I think watching the Bradley Bozeman experience, I never knew which version we were going to get every single week. There were some games, but some games it wasn't as obvious, or I don't know. He was never a good player by any means, but some games the teams would not attack him; they would attack the other players. And other games it was okay, big 75, let's go red circle and go target that guy. So you watch Tyler Biadasz, and I think the biggest takeaway of him as a player from a schematic world is just kind of a calming presence is what I would deem him overall stylistically, is just always seemed to be in control. And he did a lot of the protection stuff in Washington, and he's probably gonna have to do a lot in LA. And I think he handles that very well. I never really felt like he was making too many mistakes and getting over his skis in terms of being over aggressive or taking poor angles, things like that. There is one particular technique thing which we can get into that I do think is worth bringing up. But in terms of what you're getting in with Tyler Biadasz in the strengths, I think first and foremost, you see a guy who's truly dynamic as a run blocker. And whether it is sealing off the front side, sealing off the back side, climbing to the second level, getting out as a puller and counter and things like that. This is a guy that the Chargers can weaponize as a run blocker. And you see that time and time again all across his film. He's very capable of getting 1 or 2 splash blocks a week in that regard. And so it's not just he's athletic and he'll just get in the way. He wants to get out in space, and he will make his presence known in that regard. And I think that's the most positive thing I noticed right away is this dude is a legit weapon as a run blocker.
Yeah.
And somebody like Mike McDaniel is going to look at that. And obviously he had a very positive experience with Aaron Brewer. And I think Brewer's probably a little bit more agile, but I think in terms of style and how they could potentially use him, there's a lot of similarities with Biadasz and what he saw with what he had with Aaron Brewer.
Yeah, completely agree there. I don't know much about the similarities, as you said, with Brewer, but yeah, very, very positive viewing experience. I think with him, beyond the run game stuff, and this kind of always goes back to the Bozeman experience. we're always so guilty of comparing it to a Chargers thing, or are you an improvement or not an improvement over the current or previous Chargers thing? And to me, it just felt like, and you could explain this a lot better than I can and kind of what I'm seeing and the dynamics behind it, but essentially the interior was taken care of. This is a player who either seemed to have everybody in order and in line in terms of the guards and himself, or understood where his help was, or he understood how to go find work while there was, something going on. And it was just such a relief to see, no matter what guys were throwing at him. I started with the Chiefs game because I figured, hey, obviously the Chargers are playing the Chiefs.
You know what you're watching in the Chiefs defense and all that.
Yes, 100%. And they're sending everything. And I saw multiple linebackers, all sorts of stuff. You know what Spags is going to do.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like everything was so tightened up. Whereas before, against or with the Chargers last year, this guy's slipping through, that guy's completely unblocked. I don't know what's happening there. For better or worse, again, with Biadasz and who he is as an athlete, all the some limitations that he has, it just felt like everything was cohesive and together, which again it's just a positive viewing experience.
Yeah, I think we talked about this several times over the last couple of years. There were so many times where there's very obviously like a blitz coming to the right and the Chargers are sliding left, and they're leaving Max Crosby with a fullback to his side, and stuff like that happen all the time. All these free A gap blitzes that happen, like the Eagles game was like 5 or 6 times.
Oh, gosh,
where they just, the protection plan was horrible that game. And you watch the Commanders, and a lot of that is coaching, but at the same time, like the center is the one who's going to point out the protections, and they're the ones who can kind of veto protection calls and slide one way or slide another way, or you do a double slide or whatever the case would be. You can tell the quarterback to bring the running back up. There's a lot of responsibilities with that regard, and obviously we saw that full experience with Corey Linsley. And Biadasz is not. I don't know if we can have a full grasp of truly what his role was, just because the Washington offense is it's a little bit dumbed down in that regard with kind of protection plans, from what I understand. But he's the one who did it, and there were very few mistakes like we saw with the Chargers over the last couple of years. And I think you mentioned that the helper aspect, I think is fun to watch. Like he is trying to take people's heads off when he is free. And we saw with Zion at the end of the season, when there's just like no left tackle help, like he was in the right position and he was very aware and took a step forward in that regard, and it was very helpful. But Biadasz wants to like kill people. Like, if he is free, he is trying to hit you and punish you and make sure that your ribs are not feeling good the next day. So I loved watching that. His ability to call out protections really stood out to me. His ability to handle stunts really stood out to me. Again, this guy is just really, really in control and calm as a pass protector, while also trying to just kill you and make it sure you feel him the next day.
Yeah. So regarding the concerns which you have listed here, the first point I definitely agree with. That was evident. Drew Tranquil got him a couple of times, or at least once, letting defenders get into his chest a little too frequently at times. You said more technique versus physical. So that was a concern. There are some athletic limitations here. There's no Creed Humphrey anchor. There's no Linderbaum movement skills. But again, it's like it's not even like a criticism or concern. It's just who he is. So only that first point was a true that's not my favorite thing to see. But the rest of it, pretty good.
Yeah, I would like to see him be like a tad more urgent out of his stance. Like there were a couple of times where I feel like that was a big reason why like defensive tackles could get into his chest. You mentioned the Rams game. Braden Fisk got him a couple of times, and Fisk gets a lot of people, but Fisk is so quick off the ball, and I think that kind of rusher gives him some problems, where if he loses off the ball, I think that causes him some problems. So I would like to see him be a little bit more urgent, but again, this is a guy who's, you're not paying him, elite center money. You're not drafting him in the first round kind of thing. And then he's a physical presence, but I don't think he's like super, like he's not a super movable force off of the line of scrimmage. Like he can seal effectively. But I think my least favorite stuff in the run game of his is like him and the guards doing combo blocks, where he's the main guy with the defensive tackles. There just wasn't a whole lot of positive leg drive in that regard. So they didn't ask him to do that a whole lot. Again, the Washington offense and their run game is very Shanahan centric, and so he's not going to be asked to do that a whole lot with the Chargers. Like the Chargers run game is probably not going to be very combo block oriented. So I think this should overall be fine. But on the occasions where you did see him, be in that situation, I didn't love the tape in that regard. But, you're talking about a very little smaller thing as a pass protector and a smaller thing as a run blocker. And overall, I think everything else is very, very positive.
Yeah, this is the best of Joe Ortiz and the signings and the comp picks and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing you're hoping for. A genuine upgrade, doesn't break the bank, but it's smart. It was enough of an investment. You get it. It makes sense. The film is good. The numbers are good. You feel like you can get surplus out of him if you return to 2024 All-Pro form. And of course, if the injuries check out, which he had one at the end of the year, I'm assuming it's fine. They brought him in for a visit for a reason.
Yeah,
you feel like you're going to get at least a very good center this year, which is awesome. You tell me he's top 12, fine, no problem, no complaints from me, and I think he can be better than that.
Yeah, so I think it was an ankle injury, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I saw like ankle/knee. I don't know if it was ever disclosed officially.
Okay,
he went on IR, but it wasn't like a long-term thing. So I didn't really get to see how he recovered or what he was recovering from or the run-up. So not sure.
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, I have full confidence that if he stays healthy, he will be the Chargers center for the next few years and ideally beyond that. I mean, we've seen some centers play well into their 30s and hopefully that's the case here for Tyler Biadasz. But very good player.
Yes.
And Chargers fans, I think, should be very excited about this.
Mm-hmm.
On the opposite side of the spectrum is Cole Strange. So we'll touch on some positives here first, and then we can talk about kind of our concerns overall. I think the first thing you notice with Cole Strange, and Thomas Martinez and I were talking about this, is very opposite in the spectrum of where Biadasz, I would like to see him be a little bit more urgent out of his stance, out of the snap. Cole Strange is one of the most urgent players out of his stance that I have watched in the NFL this season. Like, he is very explosive out of his stance. And I think his overall urgency in jump sense is really nice. Like, when he can be aggressive and get his hands on rushers quick, I think that's where he's at his best. Using that ability and that twitch that he has is his best stuff. And by far, it is the best pass protection and stuff that he has on tape. As a run blocker, like, he can get out in space as well. He's not going to try and hurt people like Biadasz, but he's much more of a get out in space and get in position kind of guy, which is fine. I think both of those, sides of things can be effective. But first and foremost, man, like, his quick twitch ability as a guard is very impressive, and it is the calling card of his tape right now at this point in the NFL.
I think and that's what you didn't say was part of the criticism we'll get into in a second, but you mentioning him getting to a spot and being able to fly out of his stance, all that really does pop on tape. And we knew that about him. I think he's a 98th percentile athlete. At least he was coming out of the draft. This is not an unathletic player. This guy fits in terms of the skill set, what they're looking for. All that's great. He looked leaner on film than I would have guessed, especially lining up next to Brewer. I thought like he'd be a little bit bigger. He's 3'0". He was 305, I think, 6'5"-ish coming out of the draft. So I thought he'd be a little bit bigger, but he moves very well, like you said. Very athletic, head on a swivel, looking for work. They did plenty with him. I think you can at least, regardless of how you feel about the play, you can tell what his fit is going to be with this offense. Like, I have no doubt this makes a ton of sense. And before we get to the negatives, I do think, so the order of games I watched 3, of course, against the Chargers, week 6, week 9 against the Ravens, and then week 15 against the Steelers. I do want to get to week 18 against New England, but there's a lot of discussion online, and I can't tell how fair it is or not that to start the year, of course, coming off the injury, he wasn't as good. And then later on, people think, that he progressed and got better. That definitely bears out statistically. And I think against the Steelers, when I watched that game, that was the most impressive I had seen him in terms of he kind of squashed a few concerns that I had about him. Not that one game makes up everything. I do want to watch more of the end of that season, but I felt more positive than I did starting out initially. Okay, Steven, have at it.
So I watched 2 early games and 2 late games also.
Gotcha.
One of the later games I watched was the Saints game, which we can definitely talk about. And I think early, one of the other things I liked was his, he's coming into a new situation, new scheme, everything like that. And a lot of times as offensive linemen, as we've seen with the Chargers, who are trying to, onboard new offensive linemen, like, the communication is not there, the stun pickup, there's just a lot of errors there. But I think overall there's a lot of positive in that regard. And I do think that Cole Strange, is a guy who shows, above average IQ as a helper. He is very willing in that regard. And I think overall there's a lot of positive effort for him to finish plays and make sure that he is, consistently in the right position. So I think positively, you're talking about athleticism, you're talking about IQ, you're talking about effort. Those are the calling cards. To me, the biggest concerns are just overall play strength. And I think this affects his ability in both phases in terms of pass protection and run blocking. The Saints defensive linemen, you're talking about like Nathan Shepard and oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on his name, the kid from Clemson that they drafted a couple years ago. Brian Brzee, thank you. Those guys gave him absolute fits, and they're not even like great defensive linemen. So I didn't watch him against the Patriots. You talk about Milton Williams and Christian Barmore and stuff like that. Those guys put him in Tua's lap like 4 or 5 different times. And the bull rush, if he is one-on-one against a power rusher, it is not a good experience. And so while he's not necessarily like giving up a pressure in that sense, it is impacting the pocket and it is impacting the quarterback's ability to move. And obviously Herbert is very much more mobile than Tua Tagovailoa is at this point in his career. But if you're a guard and you can't anchor down positively against Brian Brzee and Nathan Shepard, I think that's a big concern. And then, early in the season, I think you noticed just his inability to truly impact the field in terms of combo blocks, in terms of moving people off the ball, and even in zone scheme runs, where if you're on the front side of certain zone schemes, you kind of have to wash people down, and he doesn't even really do that super effectively. There's not a lot of leg drive there. So there are some positives, but overall his play strength, I would describe as fully below average. And I think this is a guy who has a lot of issues with the size and power profiles that you're going to see on a weekly basis. And you mentioned the Chiefs blocking Chris Jones. They just signed Kyrus Tonga as a nose tackle. The Denver Broncos, they lost John Franklin Myers, but they have a great defensive lineman. So it's a potential concern that we knew about that I think was a lot more obvious on tape, is just the real lack of play strength.
Yeah, you wonder when you get these players, how much does play strength matter to these guys? It's such a, we think, 180 from what we're kind of used to, at least in terms of drafting and scouting for the Chargers under Harbaugh. We look for the gap guys, the physical guys, the big guys.
Yeah,
completely different. You go to Cole Strange. All right, how much does it matter? How much does he need? And going back to the strengths you had mentioned, like, hey, he can get to any spot. He's explosive out of stance. That's great. But like you, I had the same concerns with, are you finishing these plays? So watching him against the Chargers was the first game I turned on, because obviously, and I had to watch that one. And there are plenty of times where he can get in front of Tart, or he can get a hand on Tart or beat Tart to a spot. But is he controlling any bit of that play? It's Tart who's actually dictating that play. So Strange is getting there, but Tart is completely eyes in the backfield. Now, Tart's a very good player, so I'm not saying, but Tart's also not the greatest player either.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So Tart's a very good player. We know how good he is. We love him, but he's also not a great player. And it just seemed, especially against the Ravens too. That was the second game I watched. It just felt like those guys were just dictating the line of scrimmage. So you'd hope that the zone stuff, you don't need to be as physical. Just beat him to the spot, beat the guy, be more athletic. And the Dolphins are plenty, like, they were plenty good in the run game. It's not like it was a terrible thing and he was the reason they were bad or something. But I was just hoping for a little bit more. So getting to the spot, no problem. Finishing the play, displacing, that sort of stuff, that was not there. That was a bit concerning. But I do think against the Steelers, the last game that I did watch, I thought he was better. Like, he was finally finding more of that leg drive, a bit more lockout. He just looked better there. So I want to watch a bit more to close out the season to see how, I guess, like the more end product and because this was the first year at right guard, first year with the system, etc. Kind of a mess of a quarterback situation over there. So I want to see more of him down the line, because that against the Steelers looked a lot more positive. And I intentionally at some point just went to when they were down like 28-3, because it's just, you can't hide anymore. You can't run the ball. You're not hiding. It is you versus the Steelers defensive line. And I thought he looked better in that regard, because he was forced to do true pass sets, and that's just what it was. But yeah, I think this was it was a little disappointing. I think you're more disappointed than I was, but I was hoping for a bit more. I didn't get it, but I understand that there's also a runway to more here, assuming there's no season injury. There's no injury he's recovering from. He starts week 1, if that's the case. But whereas Biadasz felt like he spent $10 million, $12 million a year to not draft someone in the second round. Like it felt like you got a nice day 2 pick. I mean, he's, you know, he probably should go in the first round if he were in this draft, but you know what I mean? Like instead of taking Heck from Kansas State, you have Biadasz. Great. You feel good about that. With Cole Strange, it feels like you're taking a bit more of a day 3 dart throw on him, and you love the athletic potential, but there's definitely limitations here. So was definitely more impressed with Biadasz and a little underwhelmed with Cole Strange, but understanding there's a ways I think he can go.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's tough to really watch him without the lens of we wanted more at that particular position. And you know, I sit here and watch his tape, and I'm like, man, if he had not played in Miami, like, is he a starting guard anywhere in the league? And I have my doubts about that. So that's really where I'm at. Is I think he can be, you know, a decent player in this particular scheme. I don't think there's a ton more outside of that, just given the physical constraints. And so, you know, again, I was actually really impressed with his immediate adjustment into a new situation. And the IQ is there, the athleticism is there. It's just the play strength is a big concern for me. And, you know, we'll see how the Chargers kind of manage to mitigate that throughout the season.
I guess let me put it this way to kind of close things out, because it is ultimately about upgrades. Other than Becton's start to the season, which was very positive, do you feel Cole Strange was a better guard in 2025 than Becton through most of the Chargers 2025 season? Different players, obviously.
If you're just talking about like second half of the season,
yeah, give them both the second half.
If you're doing just the second half of the season, I feel like Strange was less positively impactful, but also less negatively impactful, if that makes sense. Like Becton's higher plays were still, you know, significantly better. Like his ceiling is there on some occasions, but Becton also got beat like several times on multiple games. And so I don't think Strange's bad is as bad as Becton's bad was. That's a lot of alliteration there. But I also don't think Strange's good was as good as Becton's ceiling either. So,
yeah,
you know, less of a liability, but also not as, you know, high end of a ceiling, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think, I mean, even Brandon Thorne agrees. Becton was like 18th in his rankings, and Strange was not ranked at all out of 30.
Yeah, Becton's still unsigned, by the way. Not suggesting he come back, but just
that would kill me.
Yeah. All right. Before we continue, our audio audience is going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back after this with some more takeaways from Chargers free agency film. All right, next up here on the list, continuing with the Miami Dolphins theme, is Mr. Alec Ingold. You and I were messaging back and forth about this. We don't really have any concerns about Alec Ingold. He's a good player.
He is a good player. He's a ton of fun. I almost, watching a ton of Dolphins games, obviously, you just can't help but watch Alec Ingold and be aware of him. And I think even, you kind of have to circle him because they use him in a variety of ways. He's just awesome. I don't have any concerns with him because he just is who he is. Do I think he's a Hall of Fame fullback? I don't know. Do I think he's an elite weapon out of the backfield? Not really. But I genuinely think what he does at the second level and getting there and engaging, sealing off edge rushers, being physical against the blitz, being physical as a runner, apparently hurdling people once per game or whenever he gets an opportunity to catch the football.
Yeah.
He just offers you everything we've wanted from a fullback and more of a true fullback. And they haven't really had a guy like this that plays like this and is as good as this since 2021 Steven Anderson. It's been a minute, because we did the Scott Matlock thing, and that was just a very different experience. Yeah. No matter what you think of the two players, they're very different. Yeah. The Ingold experience was just a pure, hard-nosed, true fullback, erase the, somebody in the C gap kind of guy. And I think it's going to be a ton of fun with this group.
Yeah, I think it is going to be a ton of fun. I think if you're trying to look at Alec Ingold and expect, a Kyle Juszczyk player, I think you're not getting that
right.
That kind of dynamic pass catcher. But in terms of his athletic profile and how they use him as a run blocker, you're probably getting an upgrade in that regard. Again, not going to sit here and pretend to be a super expert on Kyle Juszczyk, but You watch the way that they use him, and they'll Mike McDaniel does this really, like, him and Kyle Shanahan both do this thing where they'll put Ingold or Juszczyk kind of at an angle where they're like detached from the line, but then they're like facing the tackle this way. And then there were sometimes I watched Ingold be like in an orbit motion, and then he comes in and he's kicking out an edge rusher, or he's doing a wham block against the defensive tackle. They utilize his athleticism and physicality so well in Miami, and obviously we talked about Ingold as a no-brainer as soon as he was released from the Dolphins, and it's just a linchpin in how McDaniel wants to utilize the run game and get to the edges and be able to use motion to his advantage and be able to use Alec Ingold to identify running lanes and things like that. And then when they do leave him one-on-one in pass protection, whether it's a blitzer, whether it's an edge rusher, he can actually hold up. Like I mentioned that Saints game that I was watching for Strange. There were a couple times where Alec Ingold is blocking Cam Jordan one-on-one in pass protection. And granted, this is 2026 Alec or 2025 Cam Jordan, not 2018 Cam Jordan that was getting 18 sacks a year, but still a very good starting caliber edge rusher. And Ingold didn't give up any pressures in that game as a pass protector. So there's a ton to like in terms of his usage as a run blocker. Pass protection is really good, and I think that particular thing can just kind of give them a little something different that we were not used to, where him and Hampton can play on the field at the same time. And they can pass the ball effectively. Him and Vidal, same kind of thing. And when Hampton and Vidal were hurt, like the pass protection was a real problem for them in terms of picking up blitzes. Now you have those two, and Ingold can pick up blitzes as well. And I think there's just so much to like about Ingold, and it was a ton of fun watching him in on tape this week.
I know we're not there yet, but the next two selections are the signings we'll talk about in Kolar and Mitchell. You mentioned getting to the perimeter, getting to the outside, working from there, using what you can for Ingold. We'll talk about Kolar. Clearly, if you've watched any Mitchell highlights, and Steven posted a lot of them this week, I just Trey Harris on the outside blocking. I don't know how you don't run for 400 yards a game with this blocking group.
Yeah.
Because it's just the pieces are amazing. And I'm trying to think of, what the Dolphins had, in terms of their tight, like they had the fullback, but they didn't have a Charlie Kolar, and that sort of thing. So having
Julian Hill was probably their best blocking, and I think he signed for like $2 million recently.
Yeah. So just not to jump into the next guys, but I mean, geez, just the combination of Ingold and what they want to do, the orbit motion, as you said, all the different wrinkles you can throw at them with just Ingold, but then also a Trey Harris, but then also a Kolar, with also I don't know if Herbert's going to have to pass this season. So I guess it doesn't matter how I feel about anybody else in pass protection. The run game, if nothing else, the window dressing will be glorious.
The window dressing and getting to the edges will be a lot of fun. And we're going to get to Keaton Mitchell here in a second, but dude, Hampton is just going to he's going to feast on these outside runs, man. It's going to be a ton of fun to watch. Alec Ingold, good player. Excited to watch him play. Hopefully he sticks around for quite a while. And again, fullbacks are sticking around forever, it seems like these days. So excited about that one. Equally excited about Mr. Charlie Kolar, the former Ravens tight end. I went back and looked at some of my draft notes, and it was like, man, I'm concerned about his blocking, but his receiving tape is so good. And now it's kind of the other way around. Like his blocking tape was so much fun to watch, and it was just a very, very positive experience watching Kolar on tape for me.
I got to go back to those grades as well. I was going to go back because I remember he's look at this big power slot kind of guy, and I feel like that's
like all he did at Iowa State was slot stuff.
Which again, college football is a whole different thing, right? But I never really, not that he didn't have the requisite size, he does clearly, big dude. We call him a big power slot for a reason. Yeah. I just didn't see that kind of blocking from him. I'm genuinely shocked at how he's developed. I know all the focus is on Likely and Andrews and anybody else, and Kolar's, he's just this third guy. Good freaking blocker, man.
Yeah, I agree. And I think so similar experience, like anytime a free agent plays the Chiefs, I'm like, okay, I got to watch that game first. And there were multiple times where Charlie Kolar is on the front side, sealing against George Karlaftis and just controlling him and keeping him away, from the rushing lane. There are other times where he's working a combo block, gets up to the linebackers effectively. There were a couple times against the Packers later on in the season where they use him as a wham blocker, and he's blocking the Packers defensive lineman. Derrick Henry's running right behind him for a touchdown. Like, he's an extremely versatile run blocker. He can do all of the zone stuff. He can do all of the counter stuff. He can do wham. He can handle defensive tackles. He can block in pass protection. He probably, like, unquestionably is the best blocking tight end I've watched for the Chargers. And Will Dissly for a little bit was like really good there. Tucker Fisk, we talked about, was really good. But in terms of his versatility as a blocker, I think he can do all of it. And there were a couple of like truly freaky athleticism reps that I saw where him and Ronnie Stanley would be working a combo block. And like Ronnie Stanley, you could see him kind of like the two of them would tilt the defensive tackle. And so Kolar's kind of like going towards the middle, and then he would just detach and just clear out a linebacker. And you're like, whoa, like that is crazy athleticism in the short area. So he's incredibly well-rounded, very versatile as a blocker. The ability to seal edges with him and Ingold and the tackles, and Trey Harris, and even Ladd blocks really well. Quentin blocks a lot better than he used to. It's very exciting, and Kolar is going to be at the forefront of all of that I think Mike McDaniel is going to want to do.
Yeah, another thing that surprised me, not that there's a ton of targets here, but for a tight end, you think, okay, he's sitting over the middle, seam balls, whatever. But a lot of work to the boundary that I didn't expect. A lot of things like out routes that I did not expect him to be so involved with. And just from everything I saw, great hands, catches the ball well. We always talk about, security blanket for Herbert. We've done this every year because we're hoping for one. And I know he's not going to get Gadsden targets or McConkey targets, but it's just nice to have a reliable option. It's nice to watch the red zone and like the tight end can get targeted and he can catch a touchdown. It is really, it really is.
That's crazy.
It is kind of crazy. It is nice to watch. This is basically like performance enhancing drugs, Will Dissly, and it's great.
Yeah. I think there are not very many concerns for me here, just given what I know his role is going to be. As a pass catcher, I don't think he's somebody you're going to want to have run like post routes or choice routes or anything like that. Like, he doesn't have a ton of wiggle on the route tree or wiggle after the catch, I would say. He is athletic and he is fast, but he's not somebody I think is going to make people miss in space or do that kind of stuff. And you mentioned, I was very pleasantly surprised with his contested catch ability. His ability to sign soft spots in zone was really nice. So there's a lot to like here as a complimentary pass catcher. But I think pass catching tight end one is very much still going to be Oronde Gadsden, barring a surprising, Kenyon Sadiq first round pick. But I think the two of them will just complement each other very well, because Gadsden was a lot better as a blocker than I expected just out of Syracuse, but it's a lot of move stuff. So it's a lot of, get him to the second level. It's a lot, let's get him across the formation and, pull up to a linebacker kind of situation. You're not going to ask Gadsden to do a lot of the, nitty gritty inline tight end stuff, and Kolar can do all of it and not put Gadsden in that kind of band. So in that kind of bind. So it is, you mentioned it earlier, but watching the Dolphins blocking stuff, last year they would do a lot of situations with the 6 offensive linemen and then Ingold, and they wouldn't even have a tight end on the field, or they would go like 2 tight end sets with the 6 offensive linemen and the fullback, and then Waller and Dulcich are kind of split out as wide receivers, but then they're not actually blocking anybody. Like, it's the 6 offensive linemen and the fullback. So having a traditional Y tight end like Kolar, I think, is just going to give McDaniel a lot of flexibility. And yes, you can bring in Penning for the 6 offensive line stuff, but at the same time, like, you probably don't really need to do a whole lot of that, at least not as much as you did in Miami the last couple of years.
And the great thing about Ingold and Kolar too is that, okay, considering who they're replacing, we assume. So if Ingold's replacing Matlock, who's probably not going to be on the roster, then Kolar's replacing Fisk and or Dissly. I knew when Matlock or Fisk were on the field or Dissly was on the field, it's probably a run. I highly doubt
80% of the time they were running.
Yeah, I don't know what the split was, but if you said 80%, I would believe you. Whereas with Ingold, with Kolar, you don't officially know what that's going to be. And we'll get into the next player as well. It used to be with Gus Edwards. You know, if you looked at that 2024 season, I think he faced the most stacked boxes in the NFL. Why? Because there was just no you knew exactly what was going to happen when Gus Edwards was on the field and certain guys were out there. Whereas with this, with Kolar, with Ingold, and with Mitchell, we'll talk about, it could be anything. And that just makes it far more exciting for us as film fans, as Chargers fans. And it sucks for defenses, but I don't care.
Yeah. There was this one play action rep that they try to get Jalen Waddle on kind of like a leak concept almost. And they had Jalen Waddle in the backfield. They had oh my gosh, I talked about him as like a
Eskridge?
No, the offensive lineman. I forget his name right now. He was their backup center. I mentioned him in the free agency thing earlier, like a while ago.
Jones? No. Daniels?
Brunskill, Daniel Brunskill.
Okay.
So Brunskill, Alec Ingold, and Jalen Waddle were in the backfield on this play that I was watching.
Mhm.
And Waddle does an orbit motion, and then at the snap, Ingold and Brunskill like just book it for the opposite end of the sideline. So Waddle does an orbit motion and then circles and leaks to like does like kind of an over route. And I was like, bro, what is Mike McDaniel on right now? Tua threw a shitty pass, and so it was an incomplete pass.
He's so bad.
But Waddle was wide open, and I was like, dude, this is going to be crazy with Ladd McConkey. I can't wait to see that kind of stuff, and just the film hits every week with the versatility that all these guys provide, and McDaniel calling plays is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm excited, man.
All right, last one here is Mr. Keaton Mitchell, another former Raven here. So I'll let you go first here because I think I have some more concerns than you do about Mitchell. So I'll let you handle kind of positive stuff, and then we can kind of bounce off each other that way.
Yeah, to me, it's sort of an expectation of role. I know a lot of Chargers fans have gone, oh, he's RB2. That's great. He's better than Kimani Vidal. And I think there's a lot of reasons why I would think Vidal is the better overall running back. But this is just kind of purely you kind of bite your lip and blush a little bit when you watch Keaton Mitchell on some of these plays because the linear speed, that single cut, let's see, we're running out, and they got him outside a ton, everything possible to get him outside in some way as a member of the Ravens. You wrote here, you threatens the corner on every touch. It was either cut back because they over pursued or beat the guy to the corner. And when you had posted your video that you put up on Twitter was every Keaton Mitchell run of 10 plus yards. I figured, okay, this guy only has like 32 carries in his career. So how many possible runs could there be? There's a lot more than I thought. And did I watch all those games that you posted? Heck no. Good for you for flying through those and Control F.
It was only 10. It was only 10 carries.
Yeah.
But,
yes, more than I thought. That's for sure. And to me, between the tackles runner, so I have here like not a physical runner, but tougher runner than I would have guessed. Between the tackles, I don't really see that. And the Ravens honestly blocked pretty well for him. In some regards, he had it kind of easier than I would have expected given the reputation of that Ravens offensive line. But sometimes to the boundary, I really thought that he ran not like he was a bruiser, but the legs kept turning more than I would have thought. I always just kind of viewed him in my mind as just a smaller, maybe scat back kind of option. But if it's just pure, F equals MA of it all, and he's running very fast, then I think Keaton Mitchell just has a bit more than I expected. So for his role, he's going to be a ton of fun. But I settle in at him as an RB3. A lot of fans, I think after 3 games, Mitchell will have, 12 carries for 80 yards or something. And everyone's going to go, wow, look at those per play stats. I think if you gave him 25 carries like a Vidal, things would change. Did you watch the game against the Patriots by chance?
No, I didn't.
I was looking for games where he had a lot of carries, and that was one where he had 1.4 yards per carry. And I didn't watch that one, and I feel like there's a lot of concerns that would pop up there.
Yeah, so I watched him against the Packers. That was a positive game for Kolar and for him, so I wanted to watch that one. I watched him against the Vikings. I watched him against the Colts. I watched him against the Chiefs. Actually, he didn't play in the Chiefs game. Sorry. He was still recovering from injury. And then one of the Bengals game I watched entirely, and then the other one, he had one like 40-yard run, and I just wanted to pull that one for the clips.
Sure.
So I watched 4 games of his. I ended up with 6 games of Kolar kind of overlapping there. I think he is a little bit more physical than I would have assumed. And don't get me wrong, there's a ton to like in terms of his speed and in terms of his ability to create, those extra yards when they are not afforded to him. He had this run against the Packers where they're kind of running, I forget if it was like a wham or if it was more of a counter, but anyways, everything is going kind of up the middle a little bit, and the Packers just completely over pursued. he was one-on-one against an edge rusher, and he just does a little wiggle and then bounces it, and all of a sudden he's gone for 25 yards. And that kind of stuff is it's like every 4 carries he's gone for 20 yards. So there's a ton to like in terms of his explosiveness, but I do think that there's a lot of kind of overdoing it in that regard. Like he seems to me like somebody who's always pressing for those big gains, and sometimes that results in 1 yard, 2 yard, 3 yard runs that could have been 6 or 7 because they were blocked really well. And that's not super uncommon for this kind of style, like this kind of player. You almost always see them kind of look for that home run as opposed to, I'm just going to take the 6 yards here. And I do think that is a big reason why I agree with Kamani Vidal being your RB2, because Kamani will absolutely take the 5 yards and then he'll leg drive and he'll try and create 7-8 extra yards there. And I think just taking what the defense gives you is one of Kamani's strengths, and it's one of Keaton Mitchell's weaknesses that I saw. I felt like he was very consistently big game hunting and trying to create those extra yards when you just don't need to do that on every single snap. And I think that's my big concern. And, there's a lot of positives that come from that. But when it comes to just down to down consistency, I think that's a big reason why the Ravens favored Justice Hill as kind of the backup to Derrick Henry, because he would be the same kind of, okay, my line's blocking for 4, let me go get 6, as opposed to my line's blocking for 4, let me try and force this and maybe I can get 15 or 20. And I think Mitchell kind of overdoes it a little time. So just a little nitpicky there, but I would like to see him be a little bit more consistently just trusting the offense and trusting the scheme and being able to take what the defense gives him a little bit more often.
Yeah. So short yardage, I'm not picking him. Goal line, I'm not picking him. Red zone, depends how you're utilizing him. Because, of course, again, he can beat anyone to a corner. But, so, yeah, Vidal, I think, is a superior overall runner. It's going to frustrate fans when Vidal has a, 10 carry for 38-yard kind of day. But if you watch the film, he's surviving out there potentially. Yeah. Mitchell could have one big run. Everyone goes, wow, you got to play him more. But I do agree. And you can see it with the Ravens. It was almost frustrating watching Mitchell because I would turn on a game and I'd wait a whole drive to see him out there. And I'd watch him and he'd get 2 reps. And then I'd wait another drive to see him. He wasn't exactly out there a ton. And he comes with, of course, injury concerns. But explosive player, a good drive starter, a good cadence breaker, a good, hey, the defense tendencies is this. Let's throw this out there. I think a very good, let's open up the game a little bit here kind of player. But this player, like Mitchell, is someone in the draft where you go, hey, probably got to take him on day 3. Yes, the potential. This happens all the time, especially with running backs. You find the guys that are, oh my God, look at the home run. Oh my gosh. And you watch their 3 best games and it's 285 yards against Duke or something. And then you see their other 5 games and it's like 20 yards, 4 yards, 12 yards, because that's just kind of the hit and miss with some of these players. So he's like adding a nice, really solid day 3 back. And hopefully he can be the tendency breaker or whatever, just one explosive play a game kind of guy that maybe they were hoping Darius Davis could be. Not different positions, but same kind of outcome, I hope.
But I do think that they could use him in that regard. Like, I remember a couple of years ago when he first kind of came onto the team in Baltimore, like they would do some jet sweep action with him, and it was great. And then he got hurt, and they kind of stopped doing that. They wanted to lean into a lot of like the Derrick Henry stuff. I think Mike McDaniel can be a guy who can get more out of him in the gadgety department. And the Ravens would throw him some screens and some swing passes and stuff like that. But I do think he could give you some wheel routes. I think he could give you some more versatility as a pass catcher that he showed. The pass protection is a big issue, though. Like he does not have the physicality behind him to step up and take on a blitzer in the same way that Kamani and Amari Hampton would. So it will be a balancing act on third down of how do you want to distribute touches and playing time in that regard, where Mitchell is probably your most explosive back, although Hampton is like plenty explosive. But the other two are very much better pass protectors in that regard. So there's some give and take here with the explosiveness and the lack of size that I think can benefit him, while also, making Kamani Vidal a bit more of a sure thing as an RB2.
Yep.
And then there's also the kick return stuff. So I think very positive signing, but I agree with you. I think penciling him as the RB2 because he got the contract and Kamani Vidal is on the restricted tag or whatever, where Kamani Vidal's making $900,000. I think the film is consistently better for Vidal as opposed to Mitchell is just kind of more of your explosive touch guy.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. So there you go, everybody. That was overwhelmingly positive outside of some Cole Strange
They'll
stuff.
find a
So they'll find a way. Good players, I think,
Yeah.
and I'm excited about at least 4 of them and mildly excited about the other one. So the moves that the Chargers have made, I think, are good moves. And, some of these players I think are going to have very strong seasons in 2026.
Yeah, the vision, at least for the run game, feels awesome. Like I see what they're doing, adding to what they already have. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I do kind of agree with Southpaw here. Says Mitchell will have a special teams TD. I think we could definitely, see that happening this year with how explosive he is.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I think Ficken was probably a little limited with the returner options and Darius, his injury situation. So maybe he can be a little bit more creative with somebody like Mitchell back there.
Yeah. So Mitchell's never had a touchdown, but very good returner. I could see it happening. Just don't play Tyler Conklin on special teams.
Don't play Tyler Conklin and just see Boygby on special teams and Bud Dupree.
Hey, Boygby was a good coverage guy.
Yeah, he actually was very pleasantly surprised. I think he had 3 special teams tackles.
Yeah,
really good. But,
yeah, destroyed somebody. I forget who it was.
All right, let's finish with some of these super chats tonight. Colin Camp getting us started says that he just watched the Thule short. Kernard is going to have a breakout season 2, and he wants to know how are some of the ways that we get college prospects tape. Thanks. So we'll appreciate the super chat there, Colin. Yeah. I have not watched the short here. I don't know if there was a positive Kyle Kernard thing, but do you have any takes on Kyle Kernard in year 2?
I mean, we'd hope to see more of the player that we thought we saw in college. Granted, there was a lot of discussion about him before he transferred and some of the frustrations there. And then he goes and transfers, has that really great season, and then gets to the NFL and just doesn't really materialize, couldn't be available on special teams. I'm not even sure what they could have shown to show that he was going to have a breakout season, because it's not like he played a ton. Somebody could look up the snaps for me. Is it under 100? So hopefully he's great, because we liked him coming out of the draft. I thought he was a very, very good option, especially on day 3 at that point. Then as far as watching, tape, you can go to something like Caddy's Cutups on Patreon. There's a couple different Patreon options that provide tape. We found a Patreon option, and you can, is it Miller?
Dalton Miller, yeah.
Way, way better in terms of you want to find the most obscure game you want, go for it. He's got it all there. We've had a couple of places throughout the years send us some stuff.
Yeah, we have people send us stuff. I have Utah friends will send me Utah tape throughout the season. Unfortunately, college football thinks they need to protect college football tape. And people will get literally banned from social media if they are posting college film tapes too often. And it's insane to me. It's who do you think you're protecting here? Nobody who's scouting your team is going to be looking at a Chargers fan's social media page and being like, oh, how dare they tweet Caleb Banks clips. So yeah, it's really frustrating.
Our side?
No. But Florida is one of the main teams who will go after people for posting clips. They're notoriously bad at reporting and trying to get copyrights and stuff like that. So it's so dumb. The NFL has NFL Pro right now, and I don't love the site overall, but you can filter by each player, and you can filter runner pass, and you can get every game, and it's great. And you can go back, I think, as far as 2002 or something like that if you really wanted to on NFL Pro. So it's a wonderful site overall, and college football has nothing like it. When we first started, we would do the caddies thing, and then if I wanted to go, some of the conferences will post full games on their websites, not all 22 clips, but you'll at least get you can get full games that way.
Yeah.
It's the broadcast clips, but that's how we kind of started. But now with other Patreon accounts, it's just so much better. But it's so stupid. Just post the clips. It doesn't have to be this secretive thing on college football tape.
No, here's how difficult college football is. We were on with the Los Angeles Chargers, and they weren't sure if we were going to be able to air our Cody Alexander, Jesse Minter, Michigan tape because of restrictions. The Los Angeles Chargers weren't sure if they could air it. It's are you serious?
Yeah.
That's how protective they are? You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. I'm still surprised that our clips from Senior Bowl film are still up, because even that is voodoo these days. Giovanni Sandoval next up here wants to know, how would we feel if we drafted Sadiq first round? Kenyon Sadiq, that is. Says he's a decent blocker / weapon, but I'm hesitant to put him on a Loveland's level. Is OG good enough to skip Sadiq?
So okay, I'll break it down by section there. How would I feel if they drafted him? Oh, I don't know. At this point, they really need a card and an edge rusher, so I probably wouldn't be a big fan. But if he's BPA, I'd get it. Decent blocker. I think he's actually a good blocker.
I would say he's a lot better than decent as a blocker, personally.
Yeah, as I joke, like I think people think black tight ends can't block, and they definitely can. I'm hesitant to put him on Loveland's level. I would not put him on Loveland's level.
No.
Is Gadsden good enough to skip Sadiq? Yes. Like I think if you have a need at guard and the right guy falls, or you want to take TJ Parker or something at edge rusher, then yeah, I think Gadsden is good enough to skip Sadiq. You have plenty of other weapons. I think you're fine to skip him, but it would, I mean, if he was there, I'd get it.
Yeah, I think overall Sadiq as a blocker was very pleasantly surprising for me, just because the way that people talked about him. Yeah. Oregon fans are like, he's a great blocker, and then like draft fans were like, this guy can't block, like he's not a wide tight end. And I'm like, okay, I don't think he is necessarily, he doesn't have like the frame as of a traditional wide tight end. Like Charlie Kolar is, 4 inches taller and has, I think, like 2 inches longer of arms, and he's 15-20 pounds heavier. So he's not that. Like he is a bit more of like your Delaney Walker kind of size tight end. He's more of your move tight end or your H-back blocker, but the dude blocks his ass off. Like the effort is crazy high level stuff from him, and he wants to finish every single block that he gets out there for. So there's a lot to like of him as a blocker. I think his route running ability is probably not like super high level stuff, and you're definitely not getting a Colston Loveland in that regard. You're not getting a Brock Bowers or even like a Kyle Pitts in that regard. So you are getting more of a, what I thought of Tyler Warren coming out is like, you probably got to throw him some screens, overs, you're trying to get him more on the move in that regard, create yak opportunities for Kenyon Sadiq, I think is how you probably have to use him until he really develops in that regard. So is Gadsden good enough to pass on him? I think so, but at the same time, Kolar and Sadiq and Aronde Gadsden is like, who has a better tight end room than that? If your goal is to like truly transform your tight end room, those three guys would do it. I think as pass catchers, they would all complement each other very well. As blockers, they would complement each other very well. The question would be, how do you truly maximize a first round pick tight end when you have Gadsden, who just had 500 and whatever yards, and you just pay Charlie Kolar a bunch of money? And so financially, is it the best move? Probably not. But if you're sitting there and you're staring at Sadiq, or like, there are some players who we like a whole lot more, but if there's a run on pass rushers that, you can't really get the guys that you want at pass rusher, and you're staring at Sadiq versus the tackles who are not guards and the defensive tackles who you have a lot of concerns about, maybe the receivers go, like, there is a world where Sadiq is the best player on the board. Yeah. And if they took him, I'd be like, okay, like he's a good player, fills out the room, but I would have questions about how you actually maximize all of that room with the three of them out there.
Yeah, I agree. So looking on the last 5-ish years of tight ends, so the guys taking the first couple of rounds: Pitts, Kincaid, Bowers, Loveland, Warren, Freiermuth, McBride, Laporta, Mayer, Musgrave, Cole Strange. I forgot about Cole Strange. Brenton Strange. Sanders, and then Taylor last year. Who are you putting over Sadiq? I think for me, it's probably Pitts, because he's a total freak at the time. Bowers, Loveland. I would have put Warren ahead of him because I had Warren actually ahead of Loveland. And I think that's probably where I cut it off.
I would have Kincaid ahead of him. I would probably have him very similarly graded to like Sam Laporta, honestly. Like I feel like they would be very in the same range. Yeah. Laporta was not as athletic and not as explosive as a blocker, but the dude could run routes like nobody's business, and we've seen that in the NFL. But that's kind of the tier. So I don't, in this draft, I think Sadiq is very worth taking in the top 25 because there's just not a lot of like truly high level players. So if the Chargers took him, I would get it. But at the same time, like they need a guard, they need an edge rusher, they could use a defensive tackle, they could take a corner, a receiver, and I think need wise that would be tough to stomach for the Chargers. Where I think ideally they take a tight end in like the 4th round. I think there's a really good group of tight ends on day 3 that they could pull from, and that just kind of allows them to have that flexibility to fill out other needs, earlier before that. Alec Lavario 296. I apologize if I said that wrong. You got to let me know. It says that he lives in Denver and local sports radio went on a rant about how awful Butch Berry was and how glad they were that he's gone. Should we be concerned? Thoughts? I'm not putting a whole lot of stock into Butch Berry's time in Denver because it was Nate Hackett and everything sucked that year. It was one of the worst offenses in the league, and Russell Wilson was the quarterback. And so, sometimes separating coaches from a situation is difficult, but in this case, I do think that is A-okay to do. And I think generally that's kind of my thought process on, oh, sorry. I was getting a lot of tweets, but it's just the Saints adding Zach Wilson. So I think separating Butch Berry from Nate Hackett is fine.
Yeah. And the most recent thing in a what have you done for me lately league did a pretty good job with the Dolphins.
Yeah. I think there's a lot more positive with Miami for sure. And with Denver, it's just tough to really find any positives when the head coach is so bad and your team is horrible. And so, yeah. And it's radio fans. It's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah. Why are they going off about Butch Berry? Like, who cares? In that regard, it's not like he just came from the Broncos, and they think Bo Nix is better than Herbert. So what do we care?
Yeah. Case Wilson wants to know what positions are now luxury picks versus must address after the first couple weeks. Kenyon Sadiq, definitely a luxury pick.
Yep.
There's been a lot of like Chargers taking a safety mock draft buzz recently. I forget his name, but the kid from Toledo. That to me is very much a luxury pick, even if he might be an awesome player. I don't know. But those are the two things I think in terms of luxury picks that would stand out.
Yeah. Safety started to creep up in my mind when Jefferson was, hating that the Chargers wouldn't give him money.
When he was going on a Twitter rampage.
Yeah. I'm like, maybe they will take somebody because, Jerwin's in the slot. You have Molden. Who's the second guy? Is Mickens worth it? Is he going to be that guy? I don't know. With Jefferson back, I feel like we've kind of figured out that they're not really going to take a safety unless someone falls like Nissi or Adderley would out of retirement in the second round of the draft or something. But luxury pick. I don't know if anything's really a luxury pick. Like, they don't desperately need a corner. That's not really a luxury pick.
Yeah.
Do you feel like a pass rushing D tackle is a luxury pick? I guess he would start. I think
if you take a first round pass rusher defensive tackle type, I think that guy's starting over Eboigbe for sure.
Yeah.
So luxury pick for me would be the tight end or safety. I think outside of that, you can kind of justify. Even receiver, I think, is more closer towards a need than a luxury, just because there's the Quentin Johnson uncertainty of it all, and if you pick up his option, he's a free agent 2 years from now. If you don't, he's a free agent next year. So you don't really know what you have in KLS. So I can justify a receiver more as a non-luxury pick, but it's probably pretty close.
Yeah.
Must address, we've talked about edge rusher is definitely at the forefront of our minds, just given the uncertainty there. And we're trying to clear the Bud Dupree bar, and it would be great with a first round pick. And then guard is the big one, obviously.
Yep.
Joe Cal wants to know if we prefer Strange or Penning at guard.
Strange, then Steven, and then Penning.
Wow. Okay. I prefer Penning at tackle. I think his weaknesses, are easier mitigated at tackle. Personally, I understand that right now they don't really have a choice. But I think he can use his athletic ability a little bit more at tackle, just given the space that's out there as opposed to at guard. But that's just me.
Yep. March 24th. Penning is still the starting guard.
Yes. It's great. Love it. Anonymous. Nice. Says he made time to watch last week's Crash Out Cinema.
Yeah. I think I had one 2-ish weeks ago. Then you had one last week, which was unintentional. It's supposed to be my mopey show, and then you just like you got a lot to let some steam out, man.
And I was not planning to be that way either.
No,
but
yeah,
comments fired me up.
No, yeah, no kidding. That's funny. But thank you for watching.
Yes, thank you. Thomas Martinez, as always, says the Toledo safety is Emmanuel McNeil Warren. So a lot of people like him. Dane Brugler is convinced that he's going in the first round. Dylan Thieneman also going in the first round, safety from Oregon. He says his range starts at like pick 10. And then there's obviously Downs from Ohio State. So yeah, it's a good safety class. It's a good linebacker class. It's a shame I will not watch any of those players, but yeah, that's just me.
Yeah.
All righty. I think that's our last super chat. It is.
Cool.
Okay. Cool. Mike Robinson says, surprise us in a 3-minute video. Yeah. We wanted to go in depth on each of the players, and I feel like we did a good job of that today.
Yes. Is it because they're not like big signings?
Yeah, probably. All right. We will have some kind of episode later this week. Tyler has this school stuff all week, so we will not be back, the two of us, until next week. So I'll figure out something to do on Thursday, and then he'll figure something out to do while I'm in Chicago, and then we'll circle back, the two of us, next Thursday. So if you're from Chicago, or if you've been there a lot, feel free and send me recommendations. I have a whole list of things from Robert Mays' list and from a bunch of other friends who have visited Chicago, and got a bunch of all the Instagram influencers, and a big shout out to my guy Bobby Calderon, who lives in Chicago, is a longtime listener to the podcast. So that being said, always open to stuff. We are probably going to the Elite 8 game on Sunday night, so that'll be fun. Never been to the Elite 8 and kind of forgot that was happening there this weekend, so we'll have a fun time. Either way, if you have any Chicago recommendations, let me know. Alex, I will try and say hello to Kamen guy if he's in the area for you.
Would you recognize him walking down the street? Oh, Kamen!
I mean, you would obviously like recognize like his frame and stuff like that, but I don't think he's going to be in like the touristy areas where we're going to be at. Maybe he's at the game, and weather-wise, we're going to try to go to a Cubs game, but it's supposed to rain Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I don't know. Hopefully we get some better weather than that.
Fun stuff, though. Fun stuff. Good for you guys.
Yeah, should be fun. All right, you guys, appreciate you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff does genuinely help to continue to grow our show. And we are onward and upward to 16,000 subscribers. So I appreciate you so much. Until next time, as always, bolt up.